They went away for a week, Congress did, then they came back, and then all of a sudden he seemed to have a bit of a switch of a mentality, almost enjoying the audience, enjoying the crowds.
Why should any lawmaker work with you and trust anything you say?
Behind me is the Capitol building. They are heading in the direction of the White House, which of course has been ground zero for the protests here in Washington over the past week. We have heard from Trump before he actually went into the courtroom, again posting on his social media channel saying, heading to Lower Manhattan, the courthouse seems so surreal. Wow.
Is there anything that is transferable from the city council to White House press secretary?
Absolutely. Look, you got to have grit.
Have you chosen ambition over your values?
I've chosen my values and I've chosen my constituents.
Is that something you'd even entertain?
No.
No desire to be president. One area where the two leaders may agree to disagree, if they even bring up the topic at all during their meeting here at the Vatican, is abortion. Whereas Pope Francis continues the Catholic tradition of calling it murder, Biden publicly advocates for access.
There's also the dynamic of math. New York helped push Republicans, give them a little bit of a buffer when it comes to how big their majority is, which is already very, very slim. We've seen how difficult it was for McCarthy to even become speaker.
Foster says her guiding light as a photographer is celebrating the person who is in front of the lens. This shoot was no different. Now, this ruling has also prompted renewed calls from progressives within the New York congressional delegation, including Congressman Jerry Nadler, to expand the court, adding additional justices to try to, in their view, balance out this current 6-3 majority. This is a sign that is sitting right next to one of these flattened homes. It reads, "Yes, we need help. God bless America." And so that begs the question, what happens to these families now? Who will help them? This is not the first time a North Carolina state gobbler has been spared the oven courtesy of the President of the United States. The last time was back in 2009. This tradition of pardoning turkeys, by the way, dates back to the George H.W. Bush era. He arrived on Capitol Hill engulfed in scandal, an entourage of reporters often in tow.
Congressman Santos?
Now, as questions about his personal history and campaign finances continue to swirl, Republican Congressman George Santos is asking for 2 more years. Why do you deserve a second chance?
Well, judge me by the work that I do in this body. That's what I've been saying, right? So just let me do my work here. Give it time. Maybe by the end of this year, you'll see if you'll be able to judge me better.
Santos has supported all of the major House Republican initiatives so far, like their energy bill. He's introduced more than 10 bills of his own, including one to raise the cap on the federal deduction for state and local taxes. But so far, he's failed to gain any co-sponsors, a sign perhaps that some colleagues are keeping their distance. In launching his 2024 re-election bid, he faces stiff political winds. The New York State Conservative Party says under no circumstances will Santos get its ballot line. Fellow Long Island Republican Nick LaLota, who has called for Santos to resign, does not mince words.
And if he's not in jail next summer, I'll be fully campaigning for his Republican primary opponent.
Santos is undeterred.
There's something called the primary, and I will petition to primary on any line I choose to do so.
Santos is facing federal, state, and local investigations after revelations of questionable campaign finances and falsehoods on his resume. The House Ethics Panel is also looking into him. In January, a Newsday Siena College poll found 71% of Republican voters in his district believe he should resign. I asked if this announcement was designed to make it more politically fraught for a prosecutor to potentially charge him with a crime.
Everybody's announced they're running for re-election already, one way or another, whether quietly or just by simply posting $500,000+ quarters. I do it, it's a big problem. I mean, can somebody point me to the direction where I'm not allowed to do that because I missed that memo?
Now, Cheryl, let's talk about the money in this campaign. On the fundraising front, Santos is off to a bit of a slow start. If you think of all of the Republicans in New York that are in competitive districts, those freshmen who are running for re-election, Long Island, the Hudson Valley, in the Syracuse area, they, according to their campaign finance reports, have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars in the first few months of this year. Compare that with Santos. He raised about $5,000 in the first quarter, so some ground to make up there in what is expected to be a rather competitive race. Santos tells me that he hasn't really started the fundraising yet, but he will be making those calls. There's no shortage of sights and sounds at the Franklin County Fair, from the rides to the livestock competitions. Beef farmer Jack Tierney has lived in the town of Malone near the Canadian border since the 1970s and has high praise for his congresswoman.
I think Congresswoman Stefanik is fantastic. I could use 10 more just like her.
But he was not always so eager to offer a ringing endorsement, especially when she was first elected.
I can remember calling her office and saying, we don't need a Republican that's going to act like a Democrat. We need a true conservative, and we don't need wishy-washy or rhino Republicans.
One of the reasons he likes Representative Elise Stefanik now, he says, her willingness to defend former President Donald Trump. When Trump first became a candidate, Stefanik kept her distance. She now is one of his staunchest advocates in Congress. She proudly calls herself Ultra MAGA. Other voters have noted an evolution too, like St. Lawrence County farmer Russ Finley.
There you go.
In 2018, he launched a quixotic primary challenge against Stefanik, labeling her a Republican in name only. Now he's a believer.
Over the course of time, she had the chance to evolve to the more conservative position that she's in now and stronger position.
Would you describe her as a rhino anymore?
No. Once President Trump got in, it really opened people's eyes to say we need a fighter.
Stefanik's turn toward Trumpism mirrors the evolution of her North Country district. In the 5 years before Stefanik was elected in 2014, Democrat Bill Owens was the congressman here. Counties like St. Lawrence and Franklin voted for Barack Obama in 2012, then swung dramatically to Trump in 2016 and 2020, part of a tectonic shift of voters in largely white, rural areas across the country.
I think it shows that President Trump and the Make America Great movement has really expanded today's Republican Party. People who felt that they've been left behind by the status quo in Washington.
The massive, newly drawn 21st District stretches from the outskirts of Albany, across the Adirondacks, edging along Vermont and Canada. I spoke with voters in communities from Ogdensburg to Saranac Lake and Malone to Cobleskill. Stefanik is popular here.
Elise is someone we can trust and someone that we can rely on.
I like the freedoms that she stands for. I like that she's not overbearing.
Traveling across the district, I found many Stefanik detractors as well, who were not shy about sharing their opinions. Many of them arguing that, yes, she has changed, but not for the better. Take Christine Leo, who I met over eggs and toast in Messina. A Democrat, Leo says she once voted for Stefanik.
I did like her in the beginning, but when Trump became president, she became such a Trump follower that she acts like him now. And it kind of turned me off her.
Others see Stefanik as putting her pursuit of power first and foremost.
When the Republican Party was more of a governing party, she was part of that. And that now has become more of an authoritarian party, she's part of that.
I think she's more interested in the power that she can get and moving up in the Republican Party than she is representing the people.
Asked what she's accomplished in Congress, Stefanik cites her work securing funding for rural hospitals in Fort Drum, pushing to reopen the northern border as the pandemic eased, and updating the North American Free Trade Agreement. In Washington, though, it's her political moves that have people talking. Last year, Republican House members voted to replace Congresswoman Liz Cheney with Stefanik as GOP conference chair, in part because of her allegiance to Trump. Her new role will boost her clout in the House if Republicans regain the majority in November. Asked if they think she's evolved, her Republican colleagues on Capitol Hill say she's reflecting her voters.
We have to represent our constituents' viewpoints and values, and that's what she's doing, that's what I'm doing.
This is how Stefanik answers the question.
Do you think you've changed at all?
No, I've been a hardworking, strong conservative voice since I ran for office. I've always strived to give this district a seat at the table at the highest levels, and I'm going to continue doing that, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
Many voters here seem fine with Stefanik's new role as a fierce Trump warrior. Political handicappers rate her a solid favorite to win re-election.